So with this, yep.
The audio tape you are about to hear was produced by Warner Earhart and Associates, an education and communications enterprise which creates and delivers transformational programs. Transformation, a method of inquiry into the basic questions of human existence, actually enables and empowers an individual's ability to live and work in the world in an impactful, creative, authentic way. More than 500,000 people worldwide have participated in this inquiry since its inception in 1971. The basic course, known as the Forum, as well as courses and workshops in communication and productivity, are offered by area centers throughout the United States, Canada, Western and Eastern Europe, Asia, and Australia. For information, contact Warner Earhart and Associates at 765 California Street, San Francisco, California, 94108. This audio tape was recorded at the Daughters of the American Revolution Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. Thank you. Well, I wish I could do as warm a welcome, but my welcome is with all my heart. So thank you very much for being here. It's a real privilege for me to be able to be here and be with you. We've really had a remarkable breakthrough recently in this work, what amounts to a major breakthrough in the possibility of the value of the work and its impact on the effectiveness of living and on the quality of life for people. And I recognize as I go through these periods in this work where things become very creative and new possibilities open up that I owe a great deal to a lot of people, that the opportunity for this work, I mean, really being able to do it at all is a product of an enormous amount of support from a lot of people. Really, the work is possible out of those interactions and relationships and actions that people take with their lives, kind of like keeping their neck stuck out, living at risk, so to speak. The setup is so good when I stand on a platform and speak because it looks like a lecture or a talk or something like that. I want to be clear about the nature of the evening tonight. The nature of this evening is really in the nature of an inquiry. We're going to use the 3.5 hours that we'll spend together to inquire into certain issues. And the issues into which I'd like to inquire are not the issues with which we're ordinarily concerned. In the normal course of events, we have this everyday way of being in the world. We have these everyday concerns, our relationships, our health, our work, our jobs, our finances, our children and their lives, our friends and their lives, the world, the nation. Tonight's an inquiry into something which underlies all of that, something underneath those concerns which we have, which I'll call our everyday concerns, those concerns about our everyday way of being in the world. And we want to inquire tonight into issues which are literally at the heart of the matter of being human. These are issues with which we're not normally engaged on an everyday basis. Hopefully we've taken some time from time to time to engage in those issues. Maybe we read a book at night about those issues. Maybe we spend a few hours during the week engaged in those issues about what lies at the heart of the matter for human beings. But for the most part, our everyday lives are not about that. And so tonight is going to be a bit of a strain on you. Given I'm going to be asking you to kind of change your pace. The way in which we're engaged with life on an everyday basis, on a daily concerns basis, is not quite the appropriate mode for an inquiry into these issues which lie at the heart of the matter for human beings. We're going to take a look tonight, like a very serious look, like an inquiry, like asking the question, what kind of a being is a human being? I mean, we all kind of take it for granted. As a matter of fact, there are those who say that being for human beings is like air to the bird or water to the fish. We kind of take it for granted. We don't give much real thought to it. Not that we don't have opinions about it, and not that we haven't been told something about it, and not that we don't have certain beliefs about it, but we very rarely stop and question just what kind of a being is a human being. So we're going to, tonight, that's kind of the general question. What kind of a being is a human being? And I suggest to you that certain things will come up that may be difficult. That this is not an easy inquiry. There are not pat answers to this. And as a matter of fact, some of the answers, some of the honest answers, some of the honest possibilities about that question are somewhat uncomfortable. So in addition to actually having to work tonight, you kind of have to be up on the edge of your seat with these issues. Some of it may be a bit uncomfortable. In addition to the question, what kind of a being is a human being, we want to then go on, if we can get someplace engaged in that question, engaged with that issue, we want to go on a bit from there, in whatever opens up for us out of that inquiry, to inquire into the possibility of being for human beings. We kind of take that one for granted as well. And so those questions may not seem very exciting at first glance, since they don't have anything to do with looking good, for the most part. But I'm promising, I want to be very clear about this promise, that the inquiry tonight and the work tonight is not some esoteric matter that has nothing to do with our everyday way of being in the world, our everyday concerns. But rather, we're doing this inquiry for its practical value, for the impact that it can have on our everyday being in the world, on our everyday concerns. So we've got a very strange situation. We're going to be dealing with those issues which lie at the heart of the matter for human beings, those fundamental issues about being for human beings. And we're going to engage in this inquiry for a specific purpose, and the purpose is for the impact that it can have on our everyday concerns, on our everyday being in the world. Now, in the beginning, you may not see any relationship between this inquiry and, for instance, your relationships with your children. You may not see any correlation between this inquiry and your concerns at work, or for your concerns in your relationships, or your social concerns, or your concerns for the world. But I'm promising that there is a relationship. These issues that we're going to be addressing tonight are ancient issues. I didn't invent them. And the people with whom I worked didn't invent them, nor did you invent them. They've been around for a very, very long time. They're old questions. They're questions that came along with being human. They're questions that came along with our civilization. What we did invent, and what we're going to be working with tonight, is a way of getting at these questions. So I want to be clear that while these questions have been gotten at by many different disciplines of humanity, that the method for tonight, the discipline that we'll be using tonight, is one we invented, and I'll tell you why we invented it and what it's supposed to do. So the questions are ancient, and the method of inquiry, the discipline which we'll be using to get at those questions, is one that we invented for this occasion. The method we call transformation. It's not philosophy, although you'll hear some of the concerns from philosophy in the questions that we're asking tonight. It's not religion or theology, although you'll hear some of the concerns of religion and theology in the questions that we're asking tonight. It's not many other disciplines like sociology or anthropology. So the question about being that we're asking, this engagement with the fundamental questions, the fundamental issues for human beings about their own being. What kind of a being is a human being? What is the possibility of being for human beings? Is not a question that we want to ask in a philosophical domain, but I want to ask it in the psychological domain. So tonight is not about psychology or a psychological approach to these questions. It's not anthropological, nor is it historical. We're not trying to get at the being of human beings in a historical domain. We're not trying to get at our being from the perspective of ourselves as individuals, from ourselves as a collective, from ourselves as society, but rather we want to get at these questions about being in the domain of being. So this is an inquiry into being in the domain of being. Transformation is a discipline for dealing with being in the domain of being, such that it's not designed to produce answers. Now, I know that must sound very strange to you, because why ask the question if you're not going to get the answer? It's not designed to produce answers. It's not designed to produce solutions. It's not designed to give people a prescription for living. It's not designed to produce a recipe for getting the things out of life that you want. As it says here, the work is not about solutions or answers. It's an inquiry into the nature of being. In the process of this inquiry, insights show up that profoundly impact the quality of our lives. So that's the nature of transformation. This particular way of getting at these questions does not produce answers, does not produce solutions, does not produce recipes, does not produce prescriptions. What happens is that certain insights occur, even though you don't get answers, certain insights occur in the process of this inquiry using the invention, transformation, to get at these questions. Certain insights will show up for you. Now, the insights don't show up necessarily as, oh, I see something I didn't see before, because that would be kind of like an answer. The insights show up rather than like that as actual openings or a space for being or a freedom or an empowerment in your everyday being in the world. So I want to make that very clear. I'm going to repeat it. We're going to be inquiring into these issues that are at the heart of the matter for human beings. The discipline with which we're going to conduct the inquiry, engage in these issues, is a discipline that we call transformation. Transformation is a way of getting at these issues that is not designed to produce answers or solutions or prescriptions or recipes, but rather is a way of getting at these issues, such that insights will show up for you in the process of the inquiry, and these insights will be openings or breaking opens or a certain sense of freedom, or maybe more specifically, a being empowered, not here in the hall in thinking about it, but being empowered in your everyday being in the world, in your everyday concerns. And by empowered, I mean having a sense of freedom, a kind of new opening that was not there before, a sense of empowerment in facing the risk that being alive actually is. The challenge of our work, the challenge of our concerns for society, the challenge of our personal and individual concerns, and the challenge of our concerns like a culture, like a civilization, like a society. So that's the nature of the work tonight. What we're promising is that we're not promising an answer. We're not promising a pleasant evening. What we're promising is an inquiry that will show up in your life, in your everyday being in the world, like a breaking open, like a freedom to be, like a possibility for being in your everyday concerns with your everyday concerns. By the way, I want to be clear that I am clear. I know that everybody in the room is successful. So if you thought I was speaking to you because I thought there was something wrong with you, or you weren't successful, or you didn't know how to get along, or you weren't great, or you weren't doing well in life, that's not true. I'm clear that you're very, very successful. I'm also clear that when a person becomes successful, certain opportunities open up in their lives, and they begin to recognize that whatever got them to wherever they are, when they recognize their own success, they recognize that somehow there are concerns and possibilities in life that what brought them to where they are don't match. There's this wonderful quote by Einstein, which I'll paraphrase, in which he says that the thinking that's gotten us to where we are will be insufficient to solve the problems that go along with having gotten to where we are. So that while that thinking that you and I are, that you and I engage in may have gotten us to where we are, we need to recognize to some degree that that very thinking, the one about which we're so proud because it's gotten us to where we are, that very thinking also produces problems, which that thinking isn't powerful enough to solve. At any rate, we all are pretty proud of what we know, and we deserve to be proud of what we know. We've accomplished a lot. We've accomplished a lot as individuals. We've accomplished a lot as a society. We've accomplished a lot as a nation. We've accomplished a lot as a race, human being. So we have this whole section of the world called what I know. Now, one of the things that's happened to me as I grew up and learned more, at some point things shifted, and the more I learned, that is to say, the more I knew I didn't know. So you probably have a little section of your life, while you've got this important part called what you know, which you use to accomplish and work on the things that you're working on accomplishing in life. So you've got this section called I know. You probably also have a section called I don't know. And there's a way of working on what you don't know. And we all know how to do it. You ask questions with the intention of getting accurate answers. And when you're working on what you don't know, if you ask questions in an intelligent way and work on those questions in an intelligent way, you get answers and you expand what you know. And maybe as you expand what you know, what you don't know expands a little bit more as well. You begin to see that there are other things you don't know. Now, tonight is not about what you know. Nor, might I add, is it about what I know. This is not about my opinions about the being of human being. I promise not to give you my opinions. I will keep them to myself. I invite you to keep your opinions to yourself. That is to say, tonight isn't about what you already know, what you've been taught, what you've learned, what you've read, what everybody knows, nor is it even about what you don't know. It's about what you don't know that you don't know. Now, very few people know anything about what they don't know that they don't know. So I've spent a good part of the last 14 years of my life struggling with the issue of what I don't know that I don't know. I don't know much about it either, even though I've been struggling with it for a long time, but I know something about it. One of the things that I know about it is the kind of questions, the kind of relationship that you and I have with what we know and what we don't know has no power in the domain of what we don't know that we don't know. So what you and I are good at, which is knowing and finding out when we don't know, what you and I are good at, which is both knowing and finding out when we don't know, none of that skill, ability, none of that experience is of much value when you begin to deal with what you don't know that you don't know. Particularly, for example, asking questions to get the answer doesn't work in the realm of don't know that I don't know. You see, we could say that we were blind to this, that this is our blind spot. And I give you the example and ask you to consider the example that asking questions to get the answer, which we're all very good at, dealing with questions for which we want the answer, which we're all very good at, isn't very powerful in dealing with what you don't know that you don't know. There is, however, a way to be with questions, a way to question, a way to be with the question, which is appropriate to getting at what you don't know that you don't know. It's a kind of question or a questioning which you don't pose in order to get the answer, but which you pose in order to stand inside of like a space and look out from at whatever there is in the world for you to look out to. So I say, in this realm of not knowing that we don't know, there are ways to surface what we don't know that we don't know. One of the ways to do that is to ask questions that are designed for a purpose other than getting the answer to the question. To ask questions which, rather than providing answers, to ask questions which generate new questions, which new questions actually begin to reveal certain parts of what we don't know that we don't know. So tonight is about that. And I think you'll agree now that you've heard me speak about it for a few minutes, that that's strange territory for most of us. Mostly, we don't engage in that territory. We don't deal in that territory. So tonight may be difficult on that basis because we'll be in unfamiliar waters, not merely uncharted waters. That would be the realm of not knowing, but knowing that we didn't know. Rather, we'll be in waters that may not be like water, that may not act like water. So not only are they uncharted, they're really unknown, and there isn't anything known about not knowing about them. Something like that. Anyways, you get the point. So the questions that we ask tonight, this question, what kind of a being is a human being? What is being for human beings? Is a question not designed to get an answer, not designed to provide a solution, not designed to make you better, give you recipes for living, but rather a question in which to stand, out from which to look at your everyday being in the world, your everyday concerns. So that while the question is a little exotic, when you stand inside the question and look out, you're looking at what you are already very familiar with. You know, what is it? Looking from inside the question, what kind of a being is a human being? What is it that you think? Looking from there, what is it that you think? Looking from there, what is it that you don't think? What is it that you feel? Looking from that space of possibilities, looking from that clearing, from that opening. What is it that you feel? Looking from there, what is it that you don't feel? So it's that realm with which we're going to be dealing tonight. Now I want to talk to you for a minute about my own speaking. I'm going to be very clear that I'm not asking you to believe anything that I say. In the normal course of events, when someone speaks, we assume that they're asking us to believe what they say. I'm not asking you to believe what I say. I'm not even saying that I believe it. But I mean what I say. I'm not saying it to fool you. I am committed to what I say, but I'm not pretending that what I'm saying is true. And so you are relieved of the burden of having to figure out whether or not you agree with what I'm saying. Because I'm not telling you that it's the truth. I'm not asking you to agree with it or to believe it. I'm simply asking you to be with it. So that if I say something, I'm inviting you to consider it like a possibility. I'm inviting you to stand inside the possibility of what I'm saying and look out from it for yourself at your everyday being in the world, at your everyday concerns, at the stuff about which your life is composed. So while I mean what I say, and I'm committed to what I say, and I'm accountable for what I say, I'm not asking you to believe it, nor am I attached to it. I am also willing to give it up. If when looking out from it and looking into my own life and my own concerns, something opens up for me, I suddenly become aware of something about which I wasn't even aware that I wasn't aware. And some new possibility arises, I'm not stuck with what I'm saying to you. Now, while I'm not asking you to believe it, I'm also not a guy in a diner. A lot of people don't know about a guy in a diner, so I'm going to tell you. When I was growing up here on the East Coast, my family took trips to visit people, and they were often long distances, and given the kind of family in which I grew up, the discussion would often go on for late in the evening. Very late for a guy as young as I was. And we would drive home oftentimes very late at night. Oftentimes nights like this when it's raining or snowing or nasty. And diners, as far as I knew, were places that you stopped late at night to get a cup of coffee so you could stay awake while you were driving. And at my age, I couldn't let anybody do anything without my being there, so I always had to go in with them. I learned about guys in a diner. Guys in diners late at night, like I'm describing to you, are usually fairly lonely because there are not a lot of customers late at night. And they don't have anybody to talk to, and they just love for someone to stop in because then they've got somebody to talk to. And you go in, you're the only person there, and you sit up at the counter and you have your cup of coffee and whatever else, and you find out that this guy in the diner, the guy behind the counter, knows everything about everything. There's nothing about which he does not know. He knows what the president ought to do about the deficit. He knows what the country ought to do about its international relationships. He knows what you ought to do about your marriage. He knows what kind of work you ought to do and how, what you are doing, you could do it better. He knows something about everything. So, with regard to the issues about which we're dealing tonight, while I am not professing to tell you the truth, while I'm sharing possibilities which I'm inviting you to entertain, I'm also not a guy in a diner about this. I've been doing this work for 14 years. with an enormous record of value for those people who have participated in the work. So, a little bit, I like what Wittgenstein said about the work that he was doing. He said, my proposition serves elucidations in the following way. Anybody who understands me eventually recognizes them as nonsensical when he has used them as steps to climb up beyond them. He must, so to speak, throw away the ladder after he's climbed up on it. He must surmount these propositions, then he sees the world rightly. So I'm inviting you to climb on my conversation with you tonight. Climb up on it in your own listening. Stand up on top of what's being said. Stand up on top in your own listening. Stand up on top and look out for yourself. This is really about doing your own thinking for yourself. And this notion about thinking for yourself is not what one ordinarily thinks of as thinking. So I want to be clear about that. What I mean by thinking for yourself, and what these kind of people who we quoted on the board meant by thinking for yourself, doing your own thinking is not that ordinary thing which we call thinking. You know those thoughts that keep going on in the back of your head? That isn't the kind of thinking about which these people were speaking. They weren't talking about your opinion, or what comes out of your mouth when you say, I think, or what comes out of your mouth when you say, I feel, nor what comes out of your mouth when you say, I believe. But they weren't talking about that when they were talking about doing our own thinking. They were really talking something like this, about standing up on top of what's being said, climbing up on it, as Wittgenstein says, and looking out at life, at your life, at the world for yourself, looking for yourself, seeing for yourself. And so that's why I dare say anything at all. Not because I'm asking you to believe it, but because I'm asking you to climb up on it and look and think for yourself in the way in which we've now just spoken about thinking. I'm also committed to not being a windbag tonight. And that's like not being a guy in a diner. I promised earlier not to give you my opinion, not to tell you what I think, what I like, what I don't like, what I want, what I don't want. I want to read you this really wonderful quote from Max Weber. He says, I am under the impression that in 9 out of 10 cases I deal with windbags. Probably hung out with pretty good people if his batting average was that good. But anyway, he says, I am under the impression that in 9 out of 10 cases I deal with windbags who do not fully realize what they take upon themselves when they speak and when they listen, and when they think, and when they act, and when literally when they are. But who intoxicate themselves with romantic sensations. Like, I believe, maybe a romantic sensation. My experience has proven, maybe a romantic sensation. Everybody knows, maybe a romantic sensation. Everybody, all the best people know. I read, maybe a romantic sensation. From a human point of view, this is not very interesting to me, nor does it move me profoundly. However, it is immensely moving when a mature person, whether old or young in years, is aware of a responsibility for the consequences of his speaking. See, you and I don't take our speaking very seriously. We have no sense that we are our word. In fact, we pretty much don't trust each other's word anymore. The one way not to get elected is make promises. Nobody trusts you if you promise. Is aware of a responsibility for the consequences of his speaking, of his conduct, and really feels such a responsibility with heart and soul. He then acts by following the ethic of responsibility. By the way, responsibility doesn't mean here blame or guilt or fault. Something much more profound. Something not like you and I ordinarily mean when we say I am responsible for that. It's talking about something more profound. Anyway, he goes on to say he then acts following the ethic of responsibility, and somewhere he reaches the point where he says, here I stand. You don't hear that very much, do you? You hear, I'm here because. Let me tell you what's right about why I'm here. Let me tell you why I'm here. Let me prove to you that here is the right place. No, he says, and somewhere he reaches the point where he says, here I stand, I can do no other. That is something genuinely human and moving. And every one of us who is not spiritually dead must realize the possibility of finding himself at some time in that position. So tonight is about that position. Or again, I want to be clear with you that the work we're doing here tonight will be about issues at the heart of the matter for human beings, but the purpose of engaging in those issues, the purpose of the inquiry, is a very practical, hard-headed impact on our everyday concerns. This is not some class in philosophy. This is not a theological discussion, nor, as I said, one about history or anthropology or sociology. No, its intention is to literally impact, like break open, like empower us in our everyday being in the world. Now, I've used the word power a couple of times, and I want to tell you what I mean by power, because it's a badly understood word, or at least what I mean by it is often not well understood. So I can take about a half an hour to tell you what I mean by power, or I actually read this quote by Charles Reich, in which he says what I mean in a paragraph. Really annoys me. But in the interest of time and efficiency, I'm going to read you what he said rather than give you my half hour. I think my half hour is a little better, obviously, but I say it for efficiency's sake. He says, power to me, by the way, this comes from a lecture they did on power and the law. He says, power means to me pretty much the same thing as freedom. Power is the thing that everybody wants the most they can possibly have of. That is, skiing is power. Sex appeal is power. The ability to make yourself heard by a congressperson is power. Anything that goes out of you, anything that comes out of you and goes out into the world is power. And in addition to that, the ability to be open, to appreciate, to receive love, to respond to others, to listen to music, to understand literature, all of that is power. By power, I mean human faculties exercised to the largest possible degree. So in a way, in a large sense, by power, I mean individual intelligence. Now, when you reach out to another person, through the energy or creativity that is in you, and that other person responds, you are exercising power. When you make somebody else do something against their will, to me, that is not power at all. That is force. And force, to me, is the negation of power. So when I talk about this work having a practical, hard-headed impact on our everyday concerns and our ability to deal with those concerns, on our everyday being in the world, and empowering ourselves in our everyday being in the world, that's what I mean by power, like that. Now, dealing with what we don't know that we don't know, this arena, getting at the kind of being that human beings are, is difficult stuff. I'm going to read you a paraphrase of a quotation by the philosopher Martin Heidegger from Being and Time. He's talking about getting at this kind of being that human beings are. And he says people's kind of being thus demands that any attempt to get at that being constantly has the character of doing violence, whether to the claims of the everyday interpretation or to its complacency and its tranquilized obviousness. So he's talking about a particular kind of violence. He's talking about the kind of violent Gandhi was. He's talking about the kind of violent Martin Luther King was. A violence to the claims of the everyday interpretation, what you already know, what common sense tells you, what's clear for you. So tonight, in order to really participate in this, you're going to have the courage and the fortitude and the commitment to a kind of ruthless honesty and a compassion for the value that human beings might possibly be, required to do violence to what you already know to be true, that which you believe, that which is your opinion, which you literally, that with which you identify. That's the kind of work that you need to be willing to do to come to know what you don't know that you don't know. And it's not easy, and it's not comfortable. And tonight is not a show. And if you're here for a show, you're in the wrong place. I'm not entertaining. You probably can tell that already. You see, you and I have been trained to listen for prescriptions, to listen for recipes. We've trained ourselves and been trained by our culture, by the practices of our culture, to listen for solutions and answers. People go any place that will make them thinner, sexier, richer, etc. This is not about getting better tonight. It's about freedom and power in our everyday being in the world. We're not here to reduce the risk that life is by getting answers. We're not here to reduce the risk that living is by finding solutions or getting prescriptions or finding the recipe or the answer. We're here, rather, to conduct this inquiry in a special way, in a way that we've developed, in a way that allows people in the process of inquiring for certain break opens to happen in their everyday way of being in the world. So this is not about following what I'm saying tonight. It's not about following my propositions. It's not even about understanding. Much of this you will not understand. I say that there are questions in life about which you and I are likely never to understand, but the inquiry into which all by itself, if done in a particular way, can produce enormous value in our lives. And I'm inviting you to engage with me in a conversation that happens in my speaking and in your listening. And your listening is not passive. Not an inquiry is not passive. Not when I'm inviting you to consider possibilities. If I'm talking at you, then you may listen passively. But tonight isn't about passive listening. It's about being up on the edge of your seat with regard to these issues. One of the other things I want to be clear about is that we live in a society which is very committed to a psychological interpretation. We are a psychological interpretation. We figure each other out and figure ourselves out in the structure of psychological interpretation, like a set of assessments. We'll be talking more about that, and that will get clearer to you as we go along. And I want to be clear with you tonight that tonight is not about psychology, nor philosophy, nor theology, nor sociology. It's an inquiry into being in the domain of being, in an ontological domain, if you like. We're going to be investigating our own authenticity. We're going to be coming to grips with our own authenticity, the nature of our being. Now, we abhor the notion of being inauthentic. We absolutely abhor it. We live in a society in which the name of the game is look good. And if you examine your own actions and your own thoughts and your own feelings, from the possibility that I just mentioned to you, stand in the space and look out from that space of possibility that a great deal of what you think and do and feel is shaped by a kind of cultural commitment to looking good. See, it's not that you ever woke up one morning and say, gee, what my life's going to be about is about looking good. No, you showed up in the commitment to looking good. So I want you to be very clear that I have no concern for how you look tonight, nor for how I look, nor do I even have a concern for how human beings look. I have a concern for honesty, like ruthless honesty. And I'm going to invite you tonight to take a ruthlessly honest look at our own inauthenticity. Like I said, we abhor any possibility of being inauthentic. And that makes us inauthentic about being inauthentic. So we are essentially a cover-up for our own inauthenticity. That's what prompts Heidegger to talk about the need for violence. The need to break through this inauthenticity about our own inauthenticity. So that maybe what we'll accomplish tonight, the possibility is that at least we can come to some degree of authenticity about our inauthenticity. Now that's going to be very strange for most of the people in this room. Because the first thing you and I want to do when we find out something's wrong is fix it. That's not listening for solutions. That's not listening for getting...
We'll continue. Hope you're the best day ever. Peace.